And you never hear this from the Europeans. We must stand with Ukraine. Is standing with Ukraine sending to their death in the front line rather than racking your brains? How could this war end in a way which makes us safe and Russia safe and Ukraine safe? That's the question to ask. But they don't even ask that question. And they literally say we're standing with Ukraine when the opinion surveys show clearly that overwhelmingly the Ukrainians want the war to stop because they're being dragged to the front lines to die right now.
Can you answer the question that you said?
What's that?
Can you answer for us the question that you said? How we end this war with us being saved, Russia and Ukraine? Please answer.
Yeah, it's one piece is a little unpleasant, but absolutely part of this war ending. And the rest is so mainstream and so obvious that it shouldn't even bear need, but it obviously does. First, the obvious, the absolute obvious is Ukraine is neutral. And there's not a Western military in Ukraine, and there's no Russia militarily close to Ukraine. That's all. So Ukraine's neutral, and Europe says that's a lot of territory they'd have to cross to get to us. That's safe for everybody. That's the starting point. You're right, President Putin, because he is right. This adventure, this misadventure, this reckless bid to expand NATO to Ukraine was a bad mistake. Dreadful. That's the first point. Second point, Crimea is going to stay with Russia. That was at the core of this gambit. And that goes back not to our war, which is the Second Crimean War, but to the First Crimean War. And you can read all about it, what Palmerston or Napoleon III or Brzezinski had in mind. No, Russia's going to have its naval fleet in the Black Sea, and it's going to do its business in the Black Sea, and that's how it's going to be. And it was just fine. And by the way, if anyone wants to remember, Russia had no territorial demand on Crimea before the coup. All Russia had with Ukraine was a 25-year lease for its naval base. Thank you. So that's the second. The third piece is that Ukraine is going to cede some territory because it lost on the battlefield. And if the Europeans had a moment of reflection and honesty, they would have understood that was completely avoidable because it was not Russia's demand, actually, until November 2022. Because Russia was just saying no NATO enlargement, that was the first, and then after that, Minsk II agreement. Then after that, in November 2022, I think it is, could be September, but I think it's November, the annexation of these oblasts. And then, instead of ending this war, another 1 million to 2 million dead and wounded between now and then, and Ukraine losing on the battlefield. And remember, the whole idea was we will defeat Russia, they will crumble, they will cave in, and the one thing for sure, Brzezinski said, don't worry, they'll never side with China. Every proposition wrong. But the main point, I would say, is the Europeans should sit down with the Russians and discuss this. And the main thing that the Europeans should ask to the Russians face to face is, how do we end this so that there's not a new invasion of Ukraine? How do we end this so that you don't invade the Baltic states? How do we end this so you don't invade Poland, so you don't invade Germany, and so forth? It's not going to happen, but ask the Russians the question. Ask them. That's what diplomacy is. That's what you discuss. You don't say, we can never discuss with them, we must have war. You ask, you come up with solutions, and they're not even trying. And Ukraine is the victim, the one they pretend to save.